In the previous episode, Helena's sacrifice freed the mansion from its curse, but victory came with a devastating price. Now, Beatriz faces the cruelest challenge of all, to win back the love of a man who doesn't remember her, and prevent a dormant evil from taking advantage of its fragility to plunge the world into darkness. Get ready. The battle for memory is just beginning, and the bets are higher than ever, because the truth, like a ghost, can forever haunt those who dare to dig it up. Before we continue to unravel the secrets of the mansion and fight for Miguel's memory, we have a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying the story and want to be part of our community of horror and suspense lovers, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way, you don't miss any new episodes and stay on top of all the news. Leave your like. It is very important for us to know that you are enjoying it and to motivate us to create more and more quality content. And most importantly, leave a comment. We want to know what you think of the story, what your theories are, your favorite characters. Share your impressions with us. Your participation is essential for us to continue telling this story. So, don't forget to interact with us. Now, without further ado, let's dive back into the darkness and find out what fate has in store for Beatriz and Miguel. The darkness was total, not an ordinary darkness, the absence of light, but something more. Something that moved, that whispered, that seemed to observe. Beatriz felt the dense air in her lungs, each inhale a conscious effort not to give in to the growing panic. Miguel's hand squeezed his, a point of warmth amid the relentless cold that now dominated the mansion. Helena's voice, echoing from all sides, was a decree. You will never leave here. Beatriz tried to take a deep breath, but fear paralyzed her. She looked at Miguel, looking for some sign of hope on his face, but found only a mask of tense determination. He squeezed her hand tighter, a silent gesture that despite everything, they would face this together. Where are we going? Beatriz's voice was barely more than a whisper. Miguel shook his head. I don't know. The house, it is changing. The walls are not where they should be. And it was true. The hallway they once knew as the palm of their hand now twisted at impossible angles. Doors disappearing and reappearing in random places. The mansion seemed to be alive, breathing and writhing around them, trapping them in their private labyrinth of terror. Suddenly, a sound. A low, almost imperceptible creak coming from somewhere ahead. Miguel squeezed Beatriz's hand and pulled her closer, moving cautiously in the direction of the noise. With each step, the feeling of being watched intensified, as if countless pairs of invisible eyes followed them in the darkness. The creaking was repeated, a little louder this time. Beatriz was able to distinguish the origin, a door, ajar, swaying slightly with an invisible breeze. Miguel hesitated for a moment, assessing the situation. It could be a trap, he whispered. Or it may be our only way out, Beatriz replied, her voice charged with a determination she barely knew she possessed. Carefully, Miguel pushed the door, revealing a room steeped in shadows. The moonlight, filtering through a dusty window, barely illuminated the interior, but enough to make out a few objects. An old table, covered in dust and cobwebs, some worn chairs, and a large oval mirror hanging on the wall. The room had a strange, suffocating atmosphere. Beatriz felt the heavy air in her lungs, as if she were entering a forbidden place, tainted by a sinister energy. Where are we? Beatriz asked, her voice low. Miguel examined the room, his eye attentive to every detail. I don't recognize this place. I've never seen him before. As he spoke, a strange glow emanated from the mirror. It was not an ordinary reflex, but something more, a pale, ghostly luminosity that seemed to pulsate on its surface. Beatriz felt a shiver down her spine. She didn't like that mirror. There was something about him that disturbed her, a sense that he was looking at her. Slowly, she approached the mirror, drawn by an irresistible force. Her image reflected on the surface was pale and distorted, as if she wasn't really herself. And then she saw it. Something moved behind his reflection. a shadow, peeking into the depths of the mirror, watching her with hungry eyes. Beatrice screamed, retreating sharply. Miguel turned to her, worried. "What's wrong? What did you see?" Beatrice pointed to the mirror, trembling. "There's something inside. Something is watching me." Miguel frowned, incredulous. He approached the mirror, examining its surface. At first, he saw nothing but his own reflection. But then, he realized, a subtle distortion, as if the reality behind the mirror is bending and writhing, and then the eyes, two bright red dots peeking in the darkness, watching him with a predatory intensity. Miguel felt a chill run down his spine. He knew it wasn't an illusion. There was something in that mirror, something evil and powerful, that watched them and waited for the right moment to attack. Without thinking twice, he grabbed Beatrice's hand and pulled her out of the room, closing the door behind them. The darkness engulfed them again, but this time the sense of danger was even more intense. The house was alive, and she wanted to play with them. "We need to get out of here," Miguel said, the voice urgent. "This place is too dangerous." Beatrice nodded, trusting her instinct. They ran down the labyrinthine hallway, dodging moving doors and shadows dancing around them. Helena's voice continued to echo, mocking them at every step. "You will never escape. I will always be here." Suddenly, a flash of light. A door opened on its own, revealing a room bathed in warm, inviting light. Soft music wafted through the air, creating an atmosphere of peace and tranquility that contrasted sharply with the terror that surrounded them. Hesitating, Miguel and Beatrice approached the door, curious and cautious. What awaited them in that place? Would it be a trap or the longed-for salvation? The answer, they would soon discover, was far more complex than they imagined. Hesitating, Miguel and Beatrice approached the door, curious and cautious. What awaited them in that place? Would it be a trap or the longed-for salvation? The answer, they would soon discover, was far more complex than they imagined. The room was a living room, decorated with elegant antique furniture. A fireplace crackled in one corner, casting a golden light on the walls. A grand piano stood out in one corner, and on top of it, a framed photograph showed a couple smiling. The scene was idyllic, almost unreal, in contrast to the horror that haunted them. "This place," Beatrice began, her voice hesitating. "It seems too normal." Miguel agreed, his eye attentive to every detail. There was something strange about the atmosphere of the room, a feeling that she was out of place, as if she belonged to another time, another reality. Slowly, they entered the room, cautious. The soft music that filled the room seemed to emanate from the piano, but there was no one playing. It was a melancholic melody, loaded with longing and sadness. Suddenly, a sweet and familiar smell invaded the air. Lavender. Beatrice felt a tightness in her chest. It was the same perfume her grandmother wore, a smell that transported her to her childhood, to her happy, carefree days. She approached the fireplace, drawn by the comforting warmth of the flames. Over the fireplace, a small bookshelf displayed a collection of old novels, with worn covers and yellowed pages. Beatrice recognized some titles: Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre. They were the books her grandmother used to read to her when she was a child. The memories invaded her like a wave. The smell of lavender, the sound of her grandmother's soft voice reading heartwarming stories, the warmth of the protective embrace that made her feel safe and loved. For a moment, she forgot the horror that surrounded her, transported to a world of fantasy and comfort. "Beatriz." Miguel's voice brought her back to reality. "Are you okay?" She turned to him, a little stunned. "Yes, I am. I am fine. It's just that this place, it reminds me a lot of my grandmother." Miguel frowned, worried. He knew how much Beatrice loved his grandmother, who had passed away a few years ago. Seeing the sadness in her eyes bothered him deeply. "I'm sorry," he said, approaching her. "I know how much you miss her." Beatrice smiled faintly, grateful for his understanding. She knew that Miguel cared about her, that he was always there to support her. even in the most difficult moments. Suddenly, the piano music intensified, becoming louder and more dramatic. The flames in the fireplace crackled more intensely, casting dancing shadows over the walls. The smell of lavender became stronger, almost suffocating. Beatriz felt a shiver down her spine. Something was wrong. The atmosphere of peace and tranquility had dissipated, replaced by a sense of apprehension and danger. "Miguel," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "I don't like that. We need to get out of here." He agreed, sensing the change in the atmosphere. Something was going on, something they couldn't understand. And then, the photograph on the piano began to shine. The image of the smiling couple faded, revealing a different scene. A man and a woman in a dark room arguing heatedly. The man had his face covered by shadows, but the woman, it was Helena. Beatriz felt her blood run cold. What was going on? Why was Helena appearing everywhere? The discussion in photography intensified. Helena yelled at the man, accusing him of treason and lies. The man defended himself, denying the accusations, but his voice was muffled, almost inaudible. Suddenly, the man grabbed Helena by the shoulders, shaking her violently. The image became blurry and then darkness. The photograph returned to normal, showing the couple smiling again, but this time there was something different in his eyes. A coldness, a wickedness that was not there before. Beatriz recoiled, horrified. She didn't want to see that. He didn't want to know what had happened between Helena and that man. "We need to get out of here now," she screamed, pulling Miguel by the hand. But it was too late. The door to the living room closed on its own, locking them inside. The piano music became shrill and dissonant, and the flames in the fireplace rose, consuming everything in their path. And then, Helena's voice echoed through the room, full of anger and resentment. "You will never escape the past." Topic 3. The Mirror of the Soul. Helena's voice resounded through the room, filled with anger and resentment. "You will never escape the past." Beatriz felt the air thinning, the pressure increasing. The flames danced wildly, licking the walls and ceiling, turning the room into an oven. The heat was almost unbearable, but the fear was even greater. "Michael, what are we going to do?" Beatriz's voice trembled, panic beginning to overwhelm her. Miguel squeezed her hand, trying to give her courage. "We need to stay calm. There must be a way to get out of here." He scanned the room, looking for a way out. The door was locked, the windows sealed. There was no obvious way to escape. His gaze stopped on the oval mirror hanging on the wall. The mirror, that object that radiated a sinister energy, that seemed to observe them with an intelligence of its own. Miguel felt a chill run down his spine. Perhaps the answer was there. "Beatriz, stand behind me," he said, approaching the mirror. She hesitated but obeyed. There was something about Miguel's determination that reassured her, that made her trust him, even in the most desperate moments. Slowly, Miguel reached towards the mirror. His fingers brushed the cold, smooth surface. He closed his eyes, concentrating, trying to feel the energy emanating from the object. And then he saw it. Not a reflection of himself, but a glimpse of another place. A dark and gloomy place, full of shadows and mystery. A place that seemed to exist in another dimension, imprisoned inside the mirror. Miguel opened his eyes, surprised. I see something," he said, his voice hesitating. "A place strange." Beatriz approached, curious. "What do you see?" Miguel described what he was seeing. A long, winding corridor, lit by flickering torches with walls covered in old, dusty tapestries. In the background, a half-open door emitted a dim and inviting light. "It seems a passage," Beatriz said, her voice charged with hope. "Maybe it's a way out." Miguel agreed. It was risky, but they had no other choice. They needed to try. "Get ready," he said, squeezing her hand firmly. "We're going to step into the mirror." Beatriz took a deep breath, trying to control her fear. The idea of entering a mirror in another dimension was frightening, almost surreal, but she trusted Miguel. She knew he wouldn't leave her alone. Together, they stepped forward and walked through the mirror. The sensation was strange, as if they were being sucked into a vortex. The air became dense and oppressive, and the light disappeared, engulfing them in darkness. When they finally managed to find their way around, they realized that they were in the corridor that Miguel had described. The torches flickered on the walls, casting dancing shadows that created bizarre and menacing shapes. The air was cold and damp and smelled of mold and dust. "Where are we?" Beatriz asked, her voice low. Miguel scanned the corridor, his eye attentive to every detail. "I don't know, but it doesn't seem to be a friendly place." They began to walk down the hallway, cautious. With each step, the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadows seemed to move, whispering inaudible secrets. Suddenly, a sound, a low whisper, coming from somewhere ahead. "Michael, did you hear that?" Beatrice asked, grabbing his arm. He nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, someone is calling us." They continued to walk, following the whisper. The corridor narrowed with each step, becoming more claustrophobic and oppressive. The light of the torches flickered, threatening to die out at any moment. Finally, they reached the half-open door that Miguel had seen in the mirror. The light emanating from the room was dim and yellowish, but enough to make out a few objects: an old bed, a dusty wardrobe, and a dressing table with a small oval mirror. The room had a strange, melancholy atmosphere. Beatriz felt the heavy air in her lungs, as if she were entering a place marked by sadness and loneliness. Slowly, they pushed the door open and entered the room. In the center of the bed, sitting, was Helena. His face was pale and haggard, his eyes empty and lifeless. She wore the same old, dirty wedding dress, and her veil partially covered her face. She looked at Miguel, and a sad smile formed on her lips. "You're back," she said, her voice faint and distant. Miguel was paralyzed, not knowing what to say. He had never seen Helena so vulnerable, so broken. "Helena," he whispered, approaching her. "What happened to you?" Helena shook her head slowly. "I'm stuck here, Miguel. Trapped in this place forever." Beatriz watched the scene, feeling a tightness in her chest. She couldn't understand what was happening. Why was Helena there? Why did she look so sad? "What do you mean?" Miguel asked, his voice breaking. Helena raised her hand, pointing to the small oval mirror on the dressing table. "That mirror, it is my prison. He keeps me trapped in this world, forever." Miguel followed Helena's gaze. The mirror seemed to radiate a sinister energy, an evil force that disturbed him deeply. "What can we do to set you free?" he asked, his voice full of hope. Helena smiled sadly. "There is nothing you can do. I'm doomed to stay here until the end of the age." Suddenly, his eyes were fixed on Beatrice. His smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of anger and resentment. "But you," she said, pointing to Beatrice, "you don't belong here. You need to leave." Beatrice felt a shiver down her spine. What did Helena mean? Before she could answer, Helena got up from the bed and walked towards the mirror. His body began to dissolve into shadows, becoming more and more transparent. "Remember, Michael," she said, her voice faint and distant. "The mirror, it's the key." And then it disappeared, leaving only a trail of smoke in the air. Miguel and Beatriz were alone in the room, dazed and confused. What had happened? What did Helena want them to do? Miguel looked at the mirror. He knew the answer was there, but he also knew that he would face something terrible if he dared to approach. Taking a deep breath, he approached the mirror. Beatrice held his hand, supporting him, giving him the courage he needed. Together, they stared into the mirror, and what they saw reflected on its surface horrified them. They were not their faces, but a dark, deep abyss, filled with hungry eyes and macabre whispers. A portal to hell, and something was waiting to cross it. Helena's body began to glow, emitting an intense golden light. The light spread across the room, burning the demons and causing them to scream in pain. Helena had freed herself from her prison, and she was willing to sacrifice herself to save Miguel and Beatriz. The light grew, engulfing the entire room. The demons crumbled into ashes, their cries echoing until they were extinguished in silence. When the light finally dimmed, Helena was standing, radiant, her form ethereal and beautiful. But at the same time, she seemed fragile, as if she were on the edge of her existence. Michael lay on the floor, pale and weak, the blood staining his clothes. Beatrice was kneeling beside him, holding him in her arms, tears streaming down his face. "Michael, please don't die," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please stay with me." Helena approached them, her gaze filled with sadness. She knelt next to Miguel and reached out, touching his face gently. "I'm sorry, Miguel," she said, her voice soft. "I caused you a lot of pain, but now I can set you free." She closed her eyes and began to sing in an ancient language, a language of light and hope. A healing energy emanated from his body, enveloping Miguel in a cocoon of warmth and love. Miguel's wounds began to heal, the color returning to his face. He opened his eyes, confused, and looked at Helena. "Helena?" he whispered, his voice faint. "What are you doing?" Helena smiled sadly. "I'm saving you, Miguel. I'm freeing you from my past." She continued to sing, the energy increasing with each moment. Suddenly, an intense light emanated from her body, enveloping the entire room. Beatrice closed her eyes, protecting herself from the light. When the light went out, Helena was gone. Only a white feather remained floating in the air before falling gently on Miguel's chest. Beatrice opened her eyes and looked at Miguel. He was alive. He was cured, but something had changed. He looked at Beatrice, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Where am I?" Beatrice felt her heart stop. Miguel did not remember her. He didn't remember anything. The manor's curse had been broken. Helena had sacrificed herself to free them, but at a terrible cost. Miguel had lost his memory. Will Beatrice be able to bring Miguel back to reality? Who is really responsible for the manor's curse? And what is the connection between Miguel and the dark secret that lurks deep within the house? In the next episode, get ready to uncover the truth behind Helena's story, to face the horrors that lurk in the shadows, and to witness the power of love in its purest and most challenging form. But above all, be prepared to question everything you believe you know. Because truth, like a broken mirror, reflects multiple versions of reality, and not all of them are what they seem. Don't miss the next episode. The truth is about to be revealed, and it can destroy you.